Now let's take a look at one of my favorite attacks from the Kazagatame position, okay? Sometimes I'm here in the Kazagatame and the guy keeps boxing my hip here with his elbow. He keeps pulling his elbow down like we talked before, and it's hard for me to pass my leg over and go for that series that we did before. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to try to trap this arm here, go all the way around, catching with a Kimura here. Okay. So if I cannot pass my leg over his head because his arm is blocking my hip, I'm going to start now bothering his neck a little bit, distract the guy a little bit, right? And by the way, sometimes I don't need to keep putting pressure on the guy during the whole time, right? Especially if I see the guy is trying to throw me that way, if he's a very explosive guy, I might sit my hip on the ground, it's okay, right? I have my underhook here. I'm not putting as much pressure on the guy now, but he's not going anywhere. Both arms are under control here, right? I have my underhook. He cannot turn to his side. So if I cannot pass my leg over, I'm going to start bothering his neck. I let go of the control of the arm here and start pressing against his neck here. He has to address that, right? With the gi, of course, I can use my hand on this side, thumb on this side, of course. But as he starts defending my arm, the more I sell the choke, the more he's going to defend. So I'm going to start pinning the arm down. Pin the arm down, switch my legs. I'm going to trap his leg here with my top leg. Okay. Already from this position here, is basically a crucifix. Both of his arms are trapped here. I can start working my chokes if he has the gi thumb on the inside, like a paper cutter, as we're going to see later. Punches if it's self-defense. And I'm going to start walking around now. Let's trap this arm now with my other leg. Post my hand here on the mat if I need to for balance. And I switch. Okay? Important to trap his arm with my shin here, right? See that his arm is trapped in between my knee and my foot. I cannot lift my shin, otherwise he escapes his arm. And I cannot lift my knee. So both glued on the mat. Switch windshield. At this moment here, I'm not very heavy on top of the guy because I have weight on my knees and weight on my elbow. Okay? My other hand here is posted. Sometimes I can touch my chest on the guy here, but that's not super important. I don't need to put much weight on top of the guy because I'm controlling both of his limbs. Try to go to your left side. He can't go, right? Try to go to the other side. He's trapped. Both of his arms are trapped here. So what I'm going to do, pass my leg over. Before I pass my leg, I lift his arm here. I lift his torso, disconnect this shoulder from the mat, pushing off this hand. As I lift the guy up, I pass my leg. And I'm going to start working my Kimura here. Once I step my leg, see that I bring my knee close to his back here as I post my foot on the mat, right? Driving my knee behind his back so he cannot go back flat on the mat, right? I want the guy on his side for this finish. See also that once I'm passing my leg over, I'm going to pull the guy on his side, and I want to lift his hand up too, so I lift my elbow. If I keep his hand low, he can grab his belt or connect hand to hand together. It's going to be harder for me to go for the Kimura. I can still break the grip, of course, but if I can take care of that earlier, even better, right? So from this position, bring the guy on his side, lift my elbow up as I pass my leg, pinching here my knee against his back so he cannot go flat anymore. Elbow up, lifting his hand, switch my arms, and I have my Kimura here. The good thing about this technique is that his other arm is trapped, right? So he cannot turn. He cannot use now the other hand to defend this arm here. And I'm ready to finish, right? Keep the pressure here with my knee. Bring his elbow and tricep glued on my chest. And I'm going to start driving his hand behind his neck for the finish, right? Don't forget to use your torso too. It's not only your arms moving, my torso moves. Right? So my torso moves. As an option, If you feel a little off balance here, you can always drop your knee towards the ground and you have your Kimura here. So another common situation here is when I'm going for the Kimura, I don't do a good job lifting my elbow and clearing his arm, and he ends up grabbing his belt and controlling hand to hand together, making it hard for me to finish the Kimura. So we're gonna go for the arm bar as a combo, okay? So all the same so far, Kazakh position. I'm gonna bother his neck here. He has to address, pin, windshield. When I'm trying to turn the guy to his side using my hand here, trying to lift my elbow to disconnect his hand, I don't do a poor job. I keep my elbow low, so I turn him to his side, stepping over, but he's controlling hand to hand together. Sometimes he controls hand to hand, sometimes he controls the belt, sometimes inside of the leg, and it's harder now as I switch my arms, it's harder for me to break his grip, okay? Now, very important, if I really want to break his grip, I would probably be able to break it, okay? But be very careful with this because I've seen a lot of times people getting hurt with this. Look at the grip that he's doing here. He has this ass grip here, right? If I want to break this grip, pulling up is not the best option. I want to actually pull down, right? So his hands go like this, right? So he has his ass grip. If I push it down, then I can go. It's easier to break the grip. If I start yanking like this, yes, maybe I can break it, but I can also hurt the guy, okay? I've seen this several times in the gym. If I keep yanking here, I've seen some guys tearing the pec muscle here, right? Because he's resisting this way, I'm yanking that way. It's very, very damaging. So pay attention, be careful when you are in the gym. Don't hurt your partners. Try 1 or 2 times, you cannot break it. Let's transition to the arm bar position here, okay? So how are we gonna do this? I'm gonna lift my knee here that's smashing his arm. I'm gonna lift my knee up almost like in a mini squat. I'm gonna start facing the camera here into the arm bar position, okay? This leg is already up, I keep it up, and I lift my other leg. I'm gonna sit down, my hip as close to his shoulder as possible. My Kimura grip here is strong. I'm gonna land on this position here, okay? Now the Kimura grip is super important to maintain the guy in place. If I let go of my Kimura and I do something like this, he can go to the hitchhike escape, no problem, right? But my Kimura grip prevents the hitchhike escape because my hand here drives his wrist that way. In order to go for the hitchhike escape, he wants to bring his wrist this way to rotate his shoulder. So if I keep punching his hand that way and he goes to the hitchhike escape, he's gonna blow his own shoulder, okay? So the Kimura grip is very important. It gives me time to pass my leg now and stay in the armbar position, okay? Now, whatever break you like to do, right? Some people like to crisscross here the foot. Some people like to bite around the neck to control and keep everything tight, not allowing the guy to sit up. And then start using this free leg here to push his arm and going for the armbar. Whatever break you like, but we end up here on the armbar position. Now much easier to break than the Kimura grip. So another great option from that Kimura position, if I cannot break, I can always either go to the armbar or for the nutcracker choke. Okay, I call it nutcracker because I learned from Fabio Gurgel in one of his books like 20 years ago. I know some people call it the leg scissor. It's the same move, right? So we are here. Let's say I'm already on the Kimura here. Okay, I trapped his arm. I have my Kimura here, and he's controlling hand to hand. Sometimes hand to hand, sometimes he's controlling the belt, the leg, as we talked before. So in order to go to the nutcracker here, I want this knee down. Okay, I want to post that knee down. I can still work and try to break the Kimura here, no problem. I can still go for the armbar, no problem. Or nutcracker, okay? All I'm going to do is the knee that's behind his back, I'm going to slide under his neck, okay? And I want really the bend of my knee here, right on his spine, on his cervical, okay? And the other knee, right, the bend of my knee here, also making the shape of his chin, okay? So I have the bony part of my knee, both bony parts squeezing, right? His trachea and behind here, his cervical. It's air choke, right? So from here, Kimura, I was trapping his arm, everything is tight, cannot break it. Drop that knee down, and I'm gonna lean towards my shoulder now. I see that head, I'm sitting on top of his head. If I just lean down, his neck is going to be in the middle of my thigh. Not enough. So when I lean back on my shoulder, I slide up a little. So the bony part of my knee connects to his cervical. As I find now the top leg making the shape of his chin. Right here on the V shape of my knee. Alright, so Kimura. Position. Go to my knee. I'm going to lean on my shoulder, sliding the bottom knee underneath his neck. One shot, right? It needs a little practice, but one shot is already in perfect position. Crisscross my feet, squeeze my knees together for the nutcracker choke, okay? It's a very good option here because I'm not losing anything. I'm trying the submission. If it doesn't work, sometimes it doesn't work because as I'm falling down, he turns his head. And now I'm squeezing the side of his neck, right? He anticipated a little bit. He knew, he was familiar with this technique. So he's defending well. I cannot find here his trachea. I'm not losing anything. I can always come back up. Turn the guy to his side. I'm going to start working the Kimura again. Or maybe the armbar, right? I'm not losing anything. It's always a great option going for that nutcracker choke.
Tell you what, as awkward as it looks, Phoenix Jones has a lot of...
I can get into the Kasugatame position straight from my guard passes, or I can transition from the chest-on-chest control anytime I feel my opponent trying to escape pushing on my hip. If he tries to frame on my neck pushing me away, I can always catch him with a quick Americana. Anytime he relaxes his near arm, I can step over his head and catch him with the near side armbar. Anytime he kills the angle of my near side armbar, I can always combo with the far side armbar. If I can't find the angle for the far side armbar, I can always wrap his head and go belly down armbar. If I can't step over his head, I can always bother his neck, pin his arm and go for my windshield Kimura. If I do a poor job and he defends the Kimura, I can always combo with the windshield armbar. Another option from the failed Kimura is going for the nutcracker choke. Alright guys, now let's start the mouse trap series, okay? We have two types of mouse traps. One with my arm cross-facing my opponent and the other with my arm around his head with my elbow checking his neck. So let's start with the one cross-facing my opponent. So I have my regular chest-on-chest position here, and the guy is bothering my hip with his forearm. We already learned that I can transition to the Kazagatame. But if I find this space, if I bring my knee here next to my other knee that's next to his hip, if I find the space to open his elbow, now we are starting to separate his arm and get into the mouse trap position. I want to make sure that my elbow gets all the way deep here in the middle of my thigh, not here by my knee. If my elbow is by my knee, there is too much space for him to move his arm. Maybe he can bring the elbow down again, right? I want to bring my elbow here all the way, suck the guy in, and bring my elbow towards the mid of my thigh, and shoulder pressure here. It's not very easy to do that if the guy has a nice frame there. Sometimes he just follows my knee with his elbow, and it's hard to clear his arm, right? So what we can do is turn the guy that way, a little more controlling his legs. I'm gonna let go here, my hands again, similar to what we did before. Pick his shoulder up, dig my finger here in the middle of his armpit, a lot of shoulder pressure on his jaw. And I'm going to start turning his legs that way now with this hand. I can control his knee here, his pants if he's wearing the gi. Or I can control threading between his legs here for no gi, right? I'm going to start driving his knees that way. And I'm going to start walking my hip towards his hip. So my hip passes below the level of his elbow. And I'm going to start going back up towards his head now, with my hip really glued on his body, so I can open his arm. Right? Whenever I turn the guy that way, it's harder for him to keep his arm as tight now. I'm going to start opening with my hip, opening his arm. Now I can let go my hand here from his legs and start working the attack. His arm is strapped. I'm ready to start attacking here. Now look what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to control the arm. Usually he's going to be trying to get his underhook or frame my neck, right? That's the most common situation here. If he's trying to get his underhook on me because he wants to turn into me, make sure the shoulder pressure here is enough to keep the guy under control. Also, make sure that his arm is completely trapped on top of your leg, so he cannot bring his elbow down, helping him to turn to his side. So if he's shooting his underhook, I'm going to pin his arm against his body, tuck my foot here against his back, and I'm going to shoot my leg over his shoulder. Okay? And I'm already catching the arm. The armbar is going to be there, right? Put my hand on the mat. I'm going to catch here. Be putting my shin on his face, catching my hamstring here, sliding my armpit towards his wrist, and popping my hip against his elbow, right? Very nasty armbar, similar to the knee stomach that we did before. I can also, if I want to touch my back on the mat in order to finish this, maybe he's rotating his shoulder, turning his thumb up and down. If I don't find the angle for the armbar, I can always go back here, put my back on the mat, but make sure that I release is going to be very tight, right? Release, pass the arm in front of my chest, just like we learned. I have the armbar here. And from here, sometimes, if it decides to bridge into me, trying to escape this, it's going to land into the triangle, right? Because I passed my leg over his shoulder. And from the mouse trap position, I can work all the same techniques that we did from the classic chest on chest, right? If I start opening his lapel here and fit into my other hand, you can start applying all the same knee on belly attacks, all the same techniques, right? Including the arm sling. So if I have here my mouse trap position, he might try to shoot his underhook on me, where I'm going to trap, or he might try to frame my neck instead. If it's framing my neck, I can always work the arm sling here. It's going to be the same, right? His arm is pinned now. All I'm going to do is shoot my leg over his shoulder, and I have the same armbar, same move as before. Now let's take a look at some options when my arm is on the other side of his head. I'm not cross-facing the guy, right? So as we talked before, usually I'm gonna get into that position from the Kasugatame. So we start from the Kasugatame, getting a lot of pressure, walking, taking a big step now with this leg, bringing my hip right next to his shoulder. At this moment, my elbow goes to the ground, so I have balance. Smashing his arm and using my elbow here to check his head, right? His arm now is completely trapped. Very hard for him to go to his side or recover his guard. Even if he brings this knee on the inside here, because I'm controlling his head, he cannot go anywhere. He's not going to go anywhere, right? In order for him to recover guard, he wants to move his head that way and start recovering. But with me trapping his head here, that's impossible, right? My elbow here checking his head, nice. So I'm still controlling this arm here as I was controlling from the Kasugatame position. And now look what I'm going to do. The most basic here, and basic but it happens very often, is attacking the Americana here. Two ways. If he overcommits trying to swing his arm in front of me, I'm going to just catch, right? We already know how to do this. Bring his elbow close to his body as I bring my elbow close to my body. Figure 4 here. I'm going to start lifting his elbow. I have my American arm. I can always also turn his wrist that way, right? The more his wrist, his thumb is facing this way, the more flexible he is. The more his thumb is facing that way, the less flexible. He's already tapping, just lifting, he's already tapping, okay? So if I can work on this, the motorcycle grip here, even better. It's a very short movement, okay? That happens very often, but sometimes the guy already knows he's in trouble here. So what I'm going to start tricking the guy a little bit here. Keep everything tight, my elbow checking, my knee here, controlling his arm nice. And I'm going to just change my grips here. This hand's going to control his arm, his bicep, and this hand I'm going to keep here in front of my face. Okay? So it's not as tight now here, right? It's a little looser. He feels that he can move his arm a little more here, right? With this control, it's very tight, right? Because his elbow is up off the mat. Sometimes he cannot even circle his arm properly there, okay? But if I change my grips, now his elbow goes down a little, so he can circle his arm a little more. And that's enough. He tries to circle, boom, I catch, right? Not only that, with this grip here, I can maneuver his arm a little more, okay? Sometimes the guy knows he's in trouble and he's going to connect hand to hand together, right? If that's the case, I won't be able to attack the Americana here. There's no way I'm going to break his grip. But he's not defending his neck, right? So I'm going to start bothering his neck here, right? So he lets go of that grip. I can go back here to my stuff. If he keeps controlling again hand to hand, I can always go to the mount here, right? It's not defending the mount. So there are many options from there. Another very common option too is he just keeps his arm up a little bit here enough so he doesn't circle in front of my face here. He knows that he's in danger. So my job here now is trying to meet my shoulder by his wrist, okay? He's not trying to circle in front of my face. I'm going to drive his hand to the ground. My hand's still here next to my face. He cannot see my hand here. He doesn't know what's happening. I pull his elbow down a little. I meet my shoulder by his wrist. And I stay here, right? Now I'm going to start driving my shoulder, which drives his hand towards the ground. And I'm going to catch right here. Drive my shoulder towards the ground so I can catch that hand, right? That doesn't happen if his arm is all the way up. If the arm is all the way up, I'm going to chill here, no problem. I can attack the neck, I can coach the mount. Once he lets go of the hand, once he's not connecting hand to hand anymore here, I pull his elbow down, meet my shoulder by his wrist. And now I punch his hand right here. Not straight forward here, otherwise it's too far from this hand. Like a shoulder punch. Shoulder by his wrist. Drive it down. And I catch my Kimura, my Americana here. Elbow close to his body. If I can rotate his wrist even better. Lift his elbow up the mat, paintbrush motion. Also, it's very common here. Once I'm going for the Americana, it doesn't matter if I'm driving his wrist down or if it's circling on his own, right? Whenever I catch the Americana, it's very common. At this moment here, he knows he's in danger, so he's going to extend his arm, defending the Americana, okay? Keep my base here, both knees glued onto the guy. And what I'm going to do is follow, especially if his arm is long, he's a taller guy. I want this hand here right there on his wrist, so I'm going to move forward. And my elbow goes deep underneath his elbow, right? Right under his elbow, biting his arm here with the V shape of my arm. And I have this straight arm bar here. I'm going to just drive his wrist down and lift this elbow here for the straight arm bar, okay? If it turns, that's the mouse trap, right? We have Americana, we have straight arm bar, and we have Kimura if it turns the arm down, right? One is very common. Once I start extending his arm, now he turns his thumb that way, going to the south towards his legs. The one thing that I need to pay attention is not let him use his hand to grab his belt or his pants, right? If he starts turning his hand down, trying to grab something there, I just open his arm, okay? I bring his arm up, switch my arms now, arm goes under, keep here using my chin or my head to trap his arm. And I'm gonna do this little hook here, right? With my hand, a little hook. Once I shoot my arm under, a little hook, so I trap his arm as I can catch here with my other hand. So now we are in the Kimura city here. In order to finish, I'm going to turn my hips towards his head, pass my leg over his head so he doesn't sit up. I'm going to start lifting his shoulder off the mat. Drive his hand that way. Right? Kimura lock, very strong. So that's the mouse, the classic mouse trap here. We are here on the mouse trap position. If it stays there, okay, I'm going to start adjusting my hand and switching. Just waiting for the guy. He tries to circle his arm, I catch on the Americana, bring it down. As I'm trying to finish his things, that he extends his arm, I follow. His thumb is up. Lift my elbow, drive his hand down. He bends down, make sure his hand doesn't grab anything. I bring his arm up, switch, keep pinching here. His arm in between my shoulder and my head. Little hook, Kimura, right? Elbow on the ground next to his body here. Switch, step over so he doesn't sit up. I'm going to start cranking here my Kimura. And of course, anytime he goes with his arm down towards the leg and I don't do a good job and he's already controlling the leg, I can always go back to the KG position here, start attacking from here, no problem. Now let's take a look at an option when the guy is a little smarter, he's not circling his arm, avoiding the Americana, so we're going to start working on his neck for some chokes there, okay? So we are here in the mouse trap position. The guy is not trying to circle his arm, he already feels that he's in danger, so he's just staying there, okay? So what I'm going to do, I can always try to attack his neck here with this arm. I'm still controlling the other arm with my hand here. I'm going to shoot my arm under his neck, okay? Sometimes if he keeps his head heavy against the mat and there is no space for me here, I just pick his head up, okay? And I shoot my arm under his neck. I want to control here his lats, okay? His armpit area with my hand palm up. As I get into this position now, I make sure that I take my time there to make sure that my bicep connects with his neck, okay? No gap between my bicep and his neck. I want to shoot my arm here, controlling his armpit, and my bicep should be already touching his neck, okay? So we are here again, mousetrap position. I'm going to shoot my arm under, catching his armpit, connecting my bicep to his neck. And now I'm going to start dragging the arm that's trapped there. I'm going to go to a reverse Kasugatame position here, dropping my hip towards the ground, trapping his arm. As this hand goes to his hip, helps me to push my body down towards his head as I go stomach down, right? One motion, I'm going to break down here doing slow, but you're going to see later it's one motion, okay? I'm going to start dragging, going belly down, drag his arm against his head, okay? Now see this little gap here between my armpit and his chin. I don't want that gap, so I use my hand on the hip here to push myself towards his head, closing that gap. His chin is aligned with my armpit. My hand is still holding his armpit here. Use my hand here on his hip, start sliding down to close that gap. And now I drive into the guy. I drive my ribs against his arm, driving his arm and his shoulder against his neck. The other side of his neck is being cut by my bicep. I tense my bicep, I make a muscle, make my bicep tense and rigid against his neck, as I'm going to start driving out against his neck there. For the choke, okay? I use this hand on the hip here to drive myself against his arm, which connects his arm against his neck, okay? Make sure my bicep is connected around his neck, and I tense, making sure it's solid, not soft, otherwise it's not going to poke his neck, right? One more time here. From the mousetrap position, I'm going to shoot my arm underneath his arm. Anytime that he's not giving me the Americana here or the mousetrap attack, shoot my arm under. If I need to pick his head, I pick it up. Grab his armpit, hip down, hand on the hip. I'm already sliding here, closing the gap between my armpit and his chin and his neck. Head down, which prevents the guy going around, as we saw before, along with my hand. Slide down and into the gap. Tensing my bicep. So I go all the way down first, close the gap between my armpit and his neck, all the way down, and then I drive into him, guiding his arm against his neck. Another common situation here is when I'm going for the arm in north and south, he anticipates, he's already familiar with his choke, and he starts turning to his side and gives me the Darce choke. Let's see this transition here. I'm still here with my mouse strap. I'm going to shoot my arm under his neck, controlling his armpit just like we did before. As I drop my hip down, trying to trap his arm, he has two options. He's going to try to turn into me, which makes it easier for me to go to the mouth if I see that I cannot apply the choke. Because if he turns to his side, he kills the angle of the choke, right? I want the guy flat. Or, as I'm starting to go for the choke, it starts turning that way, right? And again, if he's on his side, I miss the choke. So what I'm going to do is walk all the way around, and my Darce is already here. I just have to position myself a little better here. I was pushing on his hip. I'm going to walk all the way around, keeping heavy on top of the guy, dragging his arm with my body, and I land here catching his neck already. Look at the positioning of my leg here. I want my knee as close to his hip as possible so he doesn't recover his guard. And because my knee is here, I have this angle here of the Darce choke. I'm driving his shoulder against his neck, right? My leg is up, so I can dip my shoulder underneath his armpit, right? If my knee is down, my shoulders kind of go parallel to the mat. I want to dig this shoulder underneath his armpit, so I pull this leg up. Catch his neck, shoot my arm through as deep as I can, and I'm going to lock my figure four here. Lock my figure four, I climb this hand all the way up. If I can catch his legs here, even better, right? Pull to break his posture. If he's posturing up, it's going to be hard for me to shoot my arm deeper, so pull his neck, dip my arm, and I'm going to figure four my arms here. Now the finish, see that once I drop my shoulder underneath his armpit here, my elbow basically touches on the mat, okay, which is fine. For the finish, I want to lift my elbow up. Once I lift my elbow up, my forearm engages against his neck. Right now my forearm is there, but it's not really engaging. If I lift my elbow up, now I have the choke. As I drive his shoulder against his neck. So it's mostly my body weight, not my arm squeeze, my arm strength. My body weight drives his shoulder against his neck. Right? That's why, again, I have this angle. If I'm facing the guy perpendicular like this, I push his shoulder away from his neck. That's not what I want. I want to have this angle where I can push his shoulder against his neck, lifting my bottom elbow, engaging my forearm against his neck. Let's take a look now at how to do the regular north and south without the arm in if my opponent clears his arm, which is very common sometimes. So beginning of the same here, I'm trying to wrap his neck with my arm. I can lift, dig under, controlling his armpit. And as I start dropping my hip towards the ground and walking towards his head, he clears his arm on his own. Okay? Very common. The guy, sometimes when I start stretching his arm, it's almost like a shoulder lock here. He doesn't like it, right? So he's going to try to clear his arm, slide his arm underneath my body. Very common situation. And we are going to land into the regular north and south. I had his armpit here. I start dragging his arm. He clears his arm. And we are in this position here. Now, the principle is going to be the same. I want to cover this gap here between my armpit and his chin. So I have to slide down first. And I'm going to wrap his neck with my arm. So the bicep is already connecting in one side. I want to have my forearm on the other side of his neck. It's pretty much a V shape here. His neck is right here. Bicep on one side of his neck, forearm on the other side of his neck. I want to bring my hand all the way up towards my chest to make this V shape. If my hand is towards my hip, it makes an L shape. I don't want that. I want a V shape cutting both sides of his neck. So we are all here controlling. He slided his arm under. I bring my hand all the way towards my chest. As I'm still using my hand on the hip, closing the gap between my forearm, between my armpit and his chin, bringing my hand all the way up. Tense my bicep here. I gotta make a muscle, make my left bicep solid against his neck. And I'm gonna start driving my ribs against his head, which pushes his head against my left bicep. Make sure to keep your head low, just like we learned before. I can transition into the mouse trap position from the chest-on-chest control, keeping my cross face. I can pin his arm down, throwing my leg over his shoulder, working on my alligator armbar triangle combo. I can also transition to the mouse trap position from the Kasugatame control. If he tries to circle his arm and frame on my neck, that's the perfect opportunity to set up my Americana. I can also set up the Americana by driving my shoulder against his wrist, pinning his hand on the ground. If he extends his arm defending the Americana, I can always follow up with my straight arm bar. If he bends his arm down defending the arm bar, I can follow up with my Kimura. If he's hiding his arms, I can always work on his neck, starting with my arm in north and south choke. If he defends the choke by turning out, I can always follow him walking around and work my Darce choke. In case he frees his trapped arm, I can always go to the regular north and south choke. Alright guys, now let's start the reverse Kasugatame series, okay, when I'm facing his legs. So as we saw for the other types of side control, I can get into that position by passing his guard and landing immediately on that position, or I can work from different types of side control. So let's say we are passing here with the double unders, sucking his hips up, controlling his shoulders, stacking the guy, walking around, clearing his legs, shooting my arm over his arm, and sitting on top of the other arm here, right? So we have two ways to play the reverse Kasugatame, as you guys know. One is with my overhook, and the other with my underhook, right? We are going to start with the overhook position. So let's start here from the position. I have my overhook here, and I'm sitting on his arm just like we learned, right? I want to sit on his bicep here, so I control his arm, making it harder for him to turn to his side. And my arm, as you guys know, my elbow is not by his neck, right? If my elbow is by his neck, his shoulder here is free. He can start shooting his underhook, turning to his side, too easily. He's already lifting his shoulder on the mat. I want to cover that shoulder so my arm gets past his shoulder. And I'm putting weight here. I'm pushing off my foot, smashing this arm down, smashing this shoulder down. Right? So it's harder for him to turn that way, and harder for him to turn that way because I'm smashing this arm here. So I have a nice control. My knee checking his hip so he doesn't slide his leg underneath my leg. So from here what's common is, since my arm is over his arm, he still is going to try to shoot his underhook and force and try to go to his side. So he's giving the arm to me here. I can start trapping this arm, okay, and going for the Kimura here. Most of the time, once I control his wrist, he already knows what's going on here, so he's going to control his leg, preventing me from locking my Kimura, turning into Kasugatame and going for the Kimura there. So he's already controlling maybe his pants, maybe he controls the inside of his leg here, and it's going to be hard for me to break this. If his arm is here, for example, right, he's not giving the arm to me, I can always start going to the mount, okay? Most of the time, if I start bringing my knee here, he's going to try to block my knee with his hand, so I catch his hand, okay? And I'm going to lock my Kimura here. If he doesn't defend, if his arm is free, or if I can break this grip, of course, I punch his hand down, my elbow goes down, and I'm going to start working from here, just like we did from the mouse trap position. Now, if I cannot break this grip, I'm going to go for my Kimura trap here. Right? Make sure my grip is good. I'm going to roll over my shoulder, landing my body behind his head. I'm going to pass my hip above his head. Keep my Kimura here nice, roll over my shoulder, pass my hip behind his head. Okay? And now it's very important, my Kimura grip here has to be very tight because it's the only thing holding the guy here. Right? How I'm going to do that? Make sure I punch, I glue his hand on his hip here, extending his arm. Okay? I want to extend my arms here. Because I know once I jump behind his head, he's going to try to come on top. There is nothing on top of him. So what he's going to do here most of the time is trying to get up. He's going to sit up, trying to face me, hoping that he can come on top. What's going to stop the guy here is my Kimura grip. I cannot allow his elbow touch on the mat. Right? So if he comes up and his elbow touches on the mat, he's gonna come all the way up and maybe even face me and take top position, right? He can free his elbow out and I lost the position. So I just extend my arm, lifting his elbow off the mat. Don't let the elbow touch on the mat, okay? That's the motion I'm looking for as he sits up. As he sits up, I lift the elbow and I bring my knee right on that space, on his hip here, right? I don't want my knee behind his back. That's not good enough. As he sits up, keep the guy there, bring my knee underneath his hip, next to his hip. And now I'm going to start shooting my leg here, getting my first hook. I'm going to his back, right? Now, how do I get my second hook? My leg is getting smashed here by his body, so I want to go to the other way, using my hook here to drive his leg down and turn him on his side. But not only that, I also want to get my seat belt here. Because if I just turn the guy to the other side, without my seat belt, he's going to start sliding out, escaping the back. So, I have my Kimura grip, my knee here by his hip, and I'm still extending my arms here, keeping his hand glued against his body. He's still trying to come to his knees. Great. I get my hook. Now I'm going to throw my seat belt. So my seat belt and my hook are going to help to turn the guy to the other side. And now I can free my bottom leg here, getting my top hook. Now let's take a look at some situations that can happen when I'm going for the Kimura trap. So I have my Kimura here. I'm rolling on my shoulder, bringing my body behind his head. And as he sits up, I'm going to attempt to shoot my hook on him. And sometimes I get his arm instead of his leg, right? So all I have to do is clear this bottom leg here that's behind his back. And we are on the crucifix position instead of the back. Right? Also, very good position, of course. So I can do from here, no gi. I can choke the guy with one arm, right? I'm gonna just control his arm instead of making Kimura grip. I can control behind, next to my head here. And now I'm controlling both of his arms with one arm free, right? I'm gonna dig my hand under his chin here. If he's stuck in his chin, I make a fist, get under, I'm gonna grab on his shoulder. Now pull my elbow back. Pull my elbow back, popping now. Driving this part of my wrist here against his neck. Once I grab like this, my wrist makes a curve here, right? I want to eliminate that curve. I want to extend my wrist. So I get on his shoulder and I extend my wrist against his neck. It's a trachea choke, air choke, right? So I land in the crucifix here. Make sure I'm controlling his arm. Both of his arms are spread out. And I'm going to start digging my arm here underneath his chin. Okay? Make a fist here, get under, control his shoulder, and extend my wrist against his neck. Another situation very common here is once I lock my Kimura here, he recognizes the position. And he's going to grab my hip here with his right hand. Okay? So I cannot jump behind his head anymore. If that's the case, just go to the mount, right? Both of his arms are busy here. Just take the mount position. Easy transition to the mount. The third situation here, very common, is when I roll and the guy doesn't sit up, he just stays there, right? He also knows about this position. He knows if he sits up, he's going to be exposing his back. So what I can do here, I can go for the nutcracker choke that we already know. I'm going to bring my knee underneath his neck and the other on top. And I have here my nutcracker choke. Alright guys, so now let's keep working on the reverse Kasugatame, but when I have my underhook. Okay, so as you guys already know, maybe the guy was framing on my neck and he starts pushing way too much. I can shoot my under, switch my hip already dragging his arm, right? Or maybe I had my mouse trap position is the same, right? He starts pushing on my neck. Anytime he pushes my neck way too much, I can shoot my arm under and start going into the reverse Kasugatame. So I have my position here established, my arm opening his arm, and I'm sitting on his arm, on his bicep with my left hip. Okay? And this hand, as you guys know, always framing his leg. Now, from this position, it's a very quick and sneaky arm bar. Okay? I want to catch this arm here. Anytime that I see that I can step over his arm here. Okay? Sometimes his arm is going to be trying to push my leg. Sometimes he's going to shoot his arm in between my legs, right? And any opportunity that I see that I can step over his arm, I'm going to do it to catch and arm bar this arm here. So all I'm going to do is back step here, and his arm is in between my legs. That's what I want, okay? Very simple now. I'm going to control his wrist. I'm going to pull his hand up. In order to do that, I pose on this foot and lift my hip up as well. I want to disconnect his elbow off the mat, so I have to lift my hip as well, pushing off this foot here. I lift my hip and bring this leg underneath, past his elbow. Okay? See that my calf here is in between his elbow and his shoulder, right? I cannot miss his elbow here, otherwise there is no submission. I lift his arm, bringing my calf behind, past his elbow. I can submit just like this, which is faster, or I can bring my leg under. Figuring for my legs is also good. If I figure for my legs, his elbow gets more off the mat. Okay? It's a little tighter too, but if his elbow is more off the mat, it means that his hand is also more off the mat. So I can push it down for the submission. That's a straight armbar submission. Right? I personally prefer to just have my leg under. Okay? It's faster and it's still enough clearance here from his hand to the mat. So look what I'm going to do. I backstep, control his wrist, pull his arm up, lift my hip just enough, bring my calf past his elbow. And then I want this 45-degree angle here for the finish. Okay? Because if I have this 45-degree angle, it means that I'm still heavy here on his far shoulder, controlling the guy. If he is 90 degrees, I have to disconnect my weight way too much from his body. And the more I lift my body off his body, of course, he can bring the other hand to help his hand. He can start turning to his side. Maybe he frees his elbow. I'm going to have trouble. So I want to keep weight here on the far shoulder, still controlling the guy. I'm going to push it down in a 45-degree angle. Now, it depends. Sometimes the guy is lanky, very long arms, and I'm going to max out my arm extension, and he still won't be tapping. Okay? I don't want to lift, sit up a little more, trying to push his hand down, because again, he's going to start turning to his side. No good. So instead of sitting up, I can use my foot. I push his hand down, I max out as much as I can. Maybe he taps, maybe not. If he doesn't tap, I step on top of that hand. Right? I don't want to keep guiding like this and lifting my torso. I push his hand as much as I can. If necessary, I'm going to step my foot on top of the hand. Ideally controlling his wrist here with his thumb up to not let him turn his thumb down and start creating some angle here, right? Killing the arm bar. So thumb up, extend, step on top. I have my arm bar there. Just pay attention here. When I pick his arm up, I lift my hip off the mat just enough to bring my leg underneath his elbow, right? If I lift my hip off the mat way too much, I can get rolled here, okay? Which is not the end of the world, because I can always transition into the omoplata, okay? But of course, ideally, I don't want that. I want to finish right away. As I pull his arm up, if I lift my hip way too much, I can get rolled and just punch his hand here bending his arm, so I land into the omoplata. Another submission from the reverse Kazgatame is called the chiropractor. Okay, I'm gonna twist his hips and try to execute either a knee bar or a hamstring stretch. Underhook on my reverse Kazgatame. And sometimes from this position, of course, my goal, as you guys know, is keep the guy flat at all times. If he turns or if he tries to turn to his side, I only want his hips turning. Okay? I'm still smashing the shoulder there to keep his torso flat. If it turns, I just want his hips, or maybe a little bit on his shoulder where he's still not able to escape and start going completely to his side, right? So I'm on this position here, sitting on his arm, all the same, maybe still working here on the first option, the arm bar, as I start working on his legs here. Maybe he turns into me trying to escape. Maybe I can pull his leg down, okay? And I'm gonna start working on this top leg here. I'm gonna bring close to me and meet here, ankle by the ankle, Achilles tendon by the Achilles tendon, okay? So we are working here, he starts turning and catch that leg. I cup here above his knee, just to hold it, a nice no-gi grip here, right? Cupping. And I'm gonna meet Achilles by the Achilles. Foot on the mat to trap his leg. Very important now to have my knee blocking his hip. Okay? I'm going to start dragging his ankle all the way back here. Okay? If the guy has flexibility issues, it's going to be a hamstring stretch. He's going to feel here behind his knee. Okay? I'm going to start dragging his ankle. Drag. He wants to follow with the bottom leg, but he can't because my knee is blocking his hip. I drag all the way back, all the way, until he taps. Okay? It depends on his flexibility. If he's very flexible, he might not tap. This hand here on the knee prevents the guy from pointing his knee up. Because if he points his knee up, he might free his foot. So I keep his leg basically almost parallel to the ground here. Drag his ankle. Drag. He's already tapped. Okay? If the guy doesn't tap, if he's more flexible, which happens sometimes, the more I drag his leg here, the more his knee comes close to my hip. If the guy's very flexible, I'm going to drag his ankle all the way, his knee is going to be here. I'm going to pop my hip into his knee. Then it turns more into a knee bar. Okay? I drag. Let's say I'm bringing all the way. His knee is really close to my hip. Keep the hand control. I pop my hip into his knee. There is not much I can do. Maybe I can gain here 2 inches, which is enough. Right? His leg is maxed out. I pop my hip into his knee for a knee bar. Sometimes also the guy still doesn't tap. Okay? And I'm going to see later what to do. But this is the chiropractor submission. Hamstring stretch. Very important to keep my knee blocking his hip here. Right? If he passes his leg or his hip above my knee, he kills this. I'm going to, I can drag his leg all the way back, but I'm not blocking his hip anymore. He kills the submission. So make sure my knee is really blocking. Sometimes I can even lift my knee off the mat a little bit here, so he doesn't pass his leg above my knee as I drag all the way back. Okay, and that's the submission. And when I'm dragging his ankle, I also want to point my knee up. Because if my knee goes down, sometimes he can slide his foot underneath my foot. So I want to open my knee up and drag his leg, which gives me way more range of motion. Now let's start transitioning into the truck position when the chiropractor submission doesn't work, okay? Maybe he's too flexible, I cannot find the angle. Let's start transitioning for better situations here. So we're starting here from the same position. Either he turns into me or I bring his leg down. And I'm going to start going for my chiropractor. It's always number one choice here, right? Trying to catch his leg here. Maybe the guy is not tapping, he's too flexible. What I'm going to do, see that I'm still putting weight on that far shoulder there. I'm going to bring this calf behind his knee, okay? I can even help with my hand. I can lift my leg here and hold it with this hand that was controlling his knee. Bring it up and trap. And now I'm going to figure four my legs, bringing my shoelaces in front of his shoelaces. Okay? Locking down here, figuring for my leg. And I'm going to extend now this leg to lock everything in place. So he can now weave his leg out. I extend my leg here. Now it's everything locked here, good. From this position, I'm going to start transitioning now into the truck. So I'm going to go to this hand here. It's going to be a rolling entry. I'm going to post my hand to the mat and start reaching my other hand to his foot. As I bring my hip on top of his hip, I'm going to do this. Okay? His leg is completely trapped. He's not going to go anywhere. I just post on my hand. Now I'm going to let go my weight here, but I'm reaching for the far leg here. Once I catch his leg, I'm going to start rolling now. Facing his legs over my left shoulder. Okay? Once I get here, I shoot my arm. So I have a smooth roll. Very simple. I was here, I locked. Right? Chiropractor, doesn't work. Lock. Extend to lock his legs. Aim for that foot, for that ankle, as I post to my hand. My hips come on top of his hips, aligning to his hips. And I shoot my arm, I roll. As I roll, I bring my leg all the way down towards the mat to bring his hips on top of my belly. Look, I bring my legs all the way down. Now his hips are on top of my belly. I lock my hands together here. We are already in the truck position, which is perpendicular to the guy, and I have my banana split as my first submission. I want to have my hands as high towards his knee as possible. Okay? The lower towards his hip, the more he can bring the knees together. No, I don't want that. I want to spread his legs. So as high towards his knee as possible. I like this grip here, the S grip. The arm close to his head. I have my knuckles facing me. And I lock my hands together. Now there are different ways I can do this. I roll the guy with my figure four lockdown. I can keep it. I'm going to pull his knee towards my head and bring his foot towards the mat. The banana split submission. My favorite way of doing this is not even having the lockdown. I like to figure four my legs. I think it's stronger, better control over the far leg. And now I can use this foot on the mat here to bridge into his hip, creating a little more separation between his legs. So I'm right here into the position. Step, if I had still my lockdown, the figure four, step this foot on the mat, so I can bridge, pushing up this foot, separating his legs here. Now look at the position of his body here. I want his hips sitting on top of my belly and the guy completely perpendicular to me. Okay? Which aligns now his knees also perpendicular here. Right? I want his knees aligned like this, not his knee down. If I'm doing like this, I'm missing the submission. Right? I don't have the angle. I want his knees aligned. Okay? So a nice grip here, drop it down my foot, push out the foot and bridge against his body. So one of the most common mistakes here is when I roll, I let his hips fall off the mat. Okay? If his hips are on the mat, I won't be able to execute the banana split. We can go to something else later. But let's recap here really quick. I bring his legs towards the ground. I hook and always chiropractor first option. If it taps, great. If it doesn't tap, I'm going to start transitioning here into the truck. Bring the bottom calf behind his knee, catch with my hand, figure 4, having my shoelaces against his shoelaces, extend my leg to trap his leg. And now the most important part of this technique, the transition, is my rolling here. I go to my hand so I can lift my torso and grab his ankle. As I grab his ankle, I'm already rolling with the momentum, right? Bringing my hip on top of his hip. And the most important thing now is driving his foot towards the ground. Because if I just do this, see that his hip is still on the mat? I don't have the angle to finish here. Once I start rolling, I want to bring his foot all the way towards the ground to pull his hips on top of my hips. Now I'm in position. Lock my hands together, figure 4, his knees are aligned. If he tries to bring it down, I keep his knee in place. And I'm going to start popping my hip against his hip for the banana split. So now when we are going for the banana split, the guy crisscross his feet defending it, so we can also combo with the calf slicer. Let's take a look here. Setup is still the same. He turns to his side, I capture the leg. You guys already know how to do this. Figure 4, catch, roll, and we are here into the banana split position. But of course, I want to separate his legs. He wants to keep his knees together. So one of the ways that he can defend is crisscrossing his feet and now making very hard for me to separate his legs. But look what happens here. Because I have my figure 4 or my lockdown, my shin is really behind his knee here, right? And that's going to be the calf slicer there. I have my figure 4 still. I'm trying to break his crisscross here, but I can't. So I'm going to start transitioning into the calf slicer. Because he's crisscrossing his foot, he's bringing actually his foot close to me, so it's within my range, right? What I'm going to do, ideally for this submission, I want to control the toes, right? My initial grip sometimes can be on the ankle if I cannot access it, or he's hiding his toes there. If I don't have a nice bite on his toes here, I go to the ankle, but ideally on the toes, okay? Let's go worst case scenario. Let's control the ankle here. And what I'm going to do, I have to control his ankle with both hands. So I don't want to be with this perpendicular angle anymore, because if I reach with my other hand here, he can control my wrist and arm bar me here. Yes, there is an arm bar, no good, right? This angle is not the ideal to finish this submission. So from the banana split, I control his ankle, and I'm going to move north and south. I can even step my leg on my figure 4 if I need to push his butt. And I want to be here, north and south position, okay? Now my arm is far from his hand. My elbow is not connected to his hip. And if I have this grip here, now with the other I go to the toes, okay? If I keep controlling his ankle, sometimes if he's strong, he can overpower my grip. His leg is very strong. But if I control his toes, now it's very, very hard, right? He cannot overpower this grip here. And I can still figure 4 my leg. And my goal is pulling his foot towards my face and driving my feet down, my leg down towards the mat. Digging my shin here below his knee. If I just pull his foot towards my face, this leg is still kind of too loose. And it might hurt myself. So I want to make this leg here of mine solid. So I figure 4 my leg again. Stomp it down as I bring his foot close to me. Okay? Don't leave your foot like this. You can hurt yourself. You can almost submit yourself with a hip lock here, right? Figure 4, push it down, pull his foot towards me. Always pay attention on this arm here. I can always, of course, if I see the threat of the arm bar, I can just change my grip here. Right? If he tries to arm bar this arm here with that grip, he cannot beat this grip because it runs against his foot. Either here if I'm safe far from his foot, or I control here. Okay? And I can always, of course, go back to banana split. Maybe he kicks my hand here with his free leg. I go back banana split. He crisscross his foot. I go back calf slicer. We keep going back and forth. He kicked my hands. Extend my leg to bring his hip on top of my hip. And I have my banana split again. This hook here is very important. Okay? I can maneuver the guy from crisscross your foot there. I can maneuver him from the calf slicer to the banana split, just extending my leg. I bring his hip on top of my hip. I want his hips on the mat for the calf slicer. For the banana split, I want his hips on top of my hip. So just extending the leg is enough to catch. Sometimes also from the truck position, I can extend my leg and take his back. I'm controlling the guy here with this hook. He rotates over me, right? So of course, if I want to take his back, I just control the shoulder now here. Pull the guy on top, and I have my back take. So look what happens sometimes here. When I'm going to the chiropractor, trying to set up either the submission or my figure 4 rolling to the truck, sometimes I don't do a good job controlling his shoulder here, and he starts going to his side and he starts going to his knees. So all I'm going to do is shoot this hook here behind his ankle. Okay? And we are on the truck position. Now I'm on top. Right? It's a truck entry from the turtle. Important to hook his ankle because when I sit down, I'm gonna put the guy on top already figuring for my leg. So I step my leg here, push off. I have my grip around his hip here, around his leg. I sit, putting the guy on top of me, and we land into the truck position, ready to submit. Sometimes when I'm here getting ready to post my leg, sit down and put the guy on top of me, he sits his hip on the ground trying to pull half guard. So I go with it, making sure that I look away, rolling over this shoulder. And we're going to still land into the truck position. Another option from the truck position is going for the twister, right? Maybe I'm having trouble finishing banana split and calf slicer, so I'm going to start transitioning to his arm and twister position. Catch, figure 4, I'm going to roll, and we are here into the truck position. He's already doing a good job preventing the banana split. Maybe I go to calf slicer and he keeps kicking my leg, or I extend his leg, I go back to banana split. And I never quite find the submission here. He's doing a good job. So whenever I see his arm close to me, I can start trying to control this arm here, right? All I'm gonna do is snatch that wrist. Maybe he's trying to break my grip here, maybe he's doing something, he's bringing his arm close to me, I'm gonna snatch, okay? And now I'm gonna have double wrist control, like a baseball bat grip, okay? I keep my elbow tight next to his armpit, and I keep pulling his arm here, extending his arm, okay? Making hard now for him to connect hand to hand together. If you connect hand together, it's hard to go for the twister. So I want to separate his hands apart by having this baseball bat grip here. His hand is really kind of on top of my chest here. And now, still with my figure 4, I'm going to step my foot on the mat here and start moving my head next to his head as much as I can. Slowly, if it's necessary, no rush. He's under control, he's not going to go anywhere, right? If I'm controlling his wrist here, he cannot turn to his left side, and he cannot turn to my side because the bottom, the far leg is trapped. So the guy is trapped here. I take my time, no problem. Use my elbow here under his armpit, extend, pull his arm, as I move my head close to his head, as much as I can. The closer my head is to his head, the easier now to capture his head and go for the submission. What I'm going to do, with my baseball bat grip here, I'm going to pass his arm behind my neck, okay, behind my back. As I pass his arm, I let go the arm that's close to his neck. I keep the other grip here, because this grip, I want to pass behind my back. As I pass behind my back, I sit up, like, shooting this arm here, extending, shooting it, shooting it. I was here, pass behind, shoot it. My shoulder goes there. Now I'm going to start catching here under his neck, okay? Sometimes, if he keeps his head heavy against the mat and I cannot get my arm under his neck, I'm going to start rocking here. I sit up, and then it gives me this space to get my arm under his neck. Now I'm ready to submit here. Now I can let go. His arm is strapped behind my back. My shoulder is pressuring his arm here down. I can go for the submission. Knuckles facing me. I'm going to reach hand to hand together. This S grip is the longest grip I have, right? The gable grip is shorter. This type of grip is going to be shorter. If I'm not super close to the guy, I want to be extending my arm as much, having the longest grip that I have in order to catch his head. Ideally, my knuckles here, they come towards the top of his head. Not really on the base of his neck because he might still be strong here and fight. I want at the crown of the head, at the crown of the head. Control hand to hand together, pull his head towards me, pop my hip against his hip. I'm having a hard time getting underneath his head. Rock, catch. Now right here, pull his head, pop my hip. We have the submission right there. One important thing here is that I want to control his arm here while I'm still controlling his leg with this hand here, right? If I abandon completely my hands here of controlling his leg and try to control his arm, he's going to roll to his left side and he's going to come on top. I have always to be controlling either the leg or the arm, right? If I don't control either one, he's going to roll. So it's important the transition here. Control the leg as I'm trying to go for the banana split. I'm still controlling the leg until I control the hand. Once I control the hand, then I can let go. Because he cannot go to his left side anymore because I'm controlling his arm. Let's take a look now on how to mount from the reverse Kazgatame position. Okay, a very good position to mount because I'm already facing his legs. So see that I'm spreading his arms, I'm facing his legs, and I have this angle here, which is very easy to mount, right? It's very easy to throw this leg here. But I have to pay attention to some stuff here, especially when I'm working towards the chiropractor and the truck position. If I bring his legs down and he stays here, yes, chiropractor is the best option, not the mount, because anytime the guy is on his side with his legs, if I try to go to the mount here, he's gonna catch this leg here. Right? He just goes and he catches in the half guard. It's maybe even going to my back. It's not a good idea to go to the mount when the guy is on his side. So I have two options. Let's say his knees are up. I want his knees up in order to go to the mount. So I can always bring his knees down and start working the chiropractor. Very commonly what he's going to do also, he's going to try to bring his knees up. So that's the action, reaction. I bring it down. If he stays, chiropractor. If he goes up, I shoot my leg, right? Because if his knees are already up, maybe he's waiting for me here. If I try to step, he catches my leg. So I have to trick the guy a little bit. Bring his legs down. If he stays, chiropractor. If he fights to go up, then I throw my leg on. Getting my hooks on the inside already. Swinging my arms around and establishing the mount here. Easy mount. So that's one way. Don't rush it, right? Don't rush. If his knees are down, it's not the time to go to the mount. Go for the chiropractor. So I keep working here all at the same time. I'm trying to backstep and catch his arm. I'm trying to work chiropractor. As I do this, I take a look at the mount too, right? I'm putting his legs down, he goes up, look. I take the mount. Another option is, since I'm opening his arms so much, there's so much space here. A lot of guys, they're going to try to step the right foot on his leg and kind of blocking my mount here. Very common, right? It's hard to go for a chiropractor now, it's hard to go for the mount. He's blocking less space here. So what I'm going to do, if I don't have the flexibility, most people don't have, I'm going to catch my own foot now. I catch with my hand and I pass right here. Right? If I try to throw my leg over his leg, I might land here into his half and lose the mount, right? Even sometimes if his knee is pointing towards my chest here, there's little space, okay, just scoop a little more. I scoop my hip more towards his head, opening a little more space here. Catch my foot and I throw here. He cannot see my legs, right? His sight is being blocked by my back, so I throw my foot. Not even touching the guy, I don't touch his leg, nothing. I just pass through. Shoot my hook. I'm going to start turning to the guy. At this point, probably he's already posting the other leg, trying to bridge. I hook the other leg, establish my mount, or even crisscross. Mount control. So we're here in reverse Kazgatame. For example, I bring his legs down. As he goes up, I go to the mount, as we know. Now, I'm gonna get my hooks there, but instead of opening my arms and establishing the mount like this, which is great, of course, but I can capture this arm here, swing around, and work a choke. So since my elbow is already on the mat here, as I go to the mount, almost at the same time as I hook, I'm going to start looping my arm around here, keeping my elbow very low, so his arm is still trapped. I'm going to loop around and get under his neck. Okay? Now, very important to have my arm low, my armpit below his elbow. Right? If I miss his elbow, I miss everything. I cannot trap his arm. Right? So, as I walk around, my armpit traps his tricep as I swing my arm around, catching underneath his head. Right? Bicep here, now I take my time here to connect my bicep really on his neck here, right? I have to go down a little bit because my head is past his head here. My bicep is on his cheeks. I want my bicep on his neck. So I go down a little. Now my bicep is in the proper position, right? A lot of weight here behind his tricep. I connect my hands together. I can try to finish from the mount first since I'm already here, or I'm gonna step out. The whole goal here now is drive my chest behind his tricep, and I'm gonna push his shoulder and his bicep against his neck. And I cut with my bicep here the other side of his neck. So we are in this position. I don't wanna pull up and neck crank the guy. I just drive my chest, I find his tricep, adjust, now my chest is connected to his tricep. Make sure my bicep on his neck, and I'm gonna start driving his shoulder and his bicep against his neck, right? Make sure that I tense my bicep, just like we're gonna see in the North and South choke. I tense my bicep. If it's too soft, it's not gonna work. I tense it and start driving my chest behind his tricep for the. I can even use my head here next to his head to drive his neck more against my bicep. And I have the choke there. It's harder to finish from the mouth, even though it's possible. So once I get here, I can also go to side control. I'm gonna dismount here, going to this side, right? And to the same side where his arms are pointing. And I'm gonna again find his tricep. My chest is too high right now. I find his tricep with my chest, and now I can drive his bicep against his neck, even driving my head against his head for the choke. Now, just be aware that this is the windshield choke, not the arm triangle. Arm triangle, we have his arm in between our necks. And then I would go to this side, yes, that's fine. But the windshield choke, his arm is in between our chests, right? So if I go to this side, he just keeps turning to turtle and he's gonna escape because there's nothing really controlling the guy. For the windshield choke, I wanna step out towards his arms, right? I step out here, I go low, chest behind his tricep, connect my bicep. I'm gonna start driving his bicep against his neck. There are two types of reverse kasugatame, one with my overhook and the other with my underhook. I can get into the reverse kasugatame position straight from a guard pass or anytime my opponent pushes on my neck so I can deflect his frame. The Kimura trap is always a great option whenever I can trap my opponent's underhook. If I can backstep over my opponent's arm, I can catch him with the 45-degree angle armbar. If he tries to bridge and roll me out of position, I can always counter that with my omoplata. The chiropractor is a great option whenever my opponent turns his hips to his side. If my opponent is flexible enough and doesn't tap for the chiropractor, I can transition into the truck position and start working my banana split. If my opponent defends the banana split by crisscrossing his ankles, I can combo with the calf slicer or even take his back. If I can reach for my opponent's arm as he defends the banana split and calf slicer, the twister is always a great option. The reverse kasugatame is a great position to mount our opponent, either creating an action-reaction or grabbing my foot if he's blocking the mount. If I can keep his arm trapped as I mount, I can go for the windshield choke, finishing from the mount or stepping out to side control. Now let's take a look at the North and South attacking series, okay? Let's start with the over-under control as you guys already learned. So there are different ways to get into the north and south, as you guys know. Let's do just a quick recap here. Let's say I have my reverse Kazagatame position with my arm over, and I'm trying to open his arm here, but he keeps his elbow really tight against his body. I cannot open his arm, so I'm going to just start passing my hip above that arm, and we're going to land here in the over-under position, right? Matching his face with my hip, turning his face to his side, so he only gives one option, which is turning that way. Another way is from the classic chest on chest. I have my classic chest on chest control. I'm going to pick his shoulder up, throw my elbow to the side of his head, and I'm going to block his hip now as I walk around to north and south. Naturally, I'm going to land into the over-under position. So, first let's attack the far arm as I go around. So we're going to start here from my classic chest on chest, lifting his shoulder, throwing my elbow over. I'm going to try to dig my thumb and my hand here under his arm, right? I lift his arm a little, throw my hand under. And I'm going to start spinning around, walking around, blocking his hip so he doesn't follow me. As I walk around, I keep shooting my arm under. If I go around, it's very deep. I don't even need to stop here, dropping my weight on his face. I can go straight to my knees, and his head's in between my knees, right? Heavy here on top of his arm. The arm is already in danger. I can even hook here his wrist to keep his arm down. And I'm going to lock my Kimura now, right? Kimura grip. There is no Kimura if the guy is flat on his back, so I want to turn him to his side. I'm going to do that by extending my arm, extend and lift his elbow. I extend, lifting his elbow, turn to his side, and I'm going to step here behind his back, just like we learned from the windshield Kazagatame. So I'm here with my Kimura, I extend my arm, turning him to his side, stepping my leg behind his back so he doesn't go flat again. And now ideally, if I could finish here, great, but because I'm not trapping his arm with this leg, he can always free his head out of the way and maybe escape this. Right? So even though, yes, I can finish from here, best if I can trap this arm. Right? Maybe he's already connecting hand to hand together. It doesn't matter. I just step my knee over. Right? Trap his arm in between my foot and my knee. And now it's much easier to break this grip as we learned. Or I can even start working my arm bar. You guys know how to do this. Finishing, break this grip, is controlling, finishing the arm bar. Now still working on the over-under, but attacking now the near arm, okay? So what happens sometimes is as I throw my arm to the other side, trying to get my hand underneath his arm, once I free his arm blocking his hip, he brings his elbow tight against the mat. So I cannot hook under, right? So I'm still blocking, still going around north and south. And now if I cannot get my arm under his arm here because his elbow is heavy, I'm going to start working on the other arm here. I'm going to get under this arm, palm up. I'm going to hug his shoulder here. Okay? So once I hug his shoulder, I'm going to start going back to side control, putting a lot of weight now with my shoulder, leaning with this angle here. Right? I'm controlling the guy with my shoulder a lot. If I lift my knees off the mat, it's even more. Right? For demonstration purposes, I'm going to keep my knees on the mat here so he can breathe a little more. Cup his shoulder, and I have here the paper cutter. Okay? I'm going to pull his shoulder up and smash his throat with my forearm. Okay? How do I do that? Cup his shoulder here. I want to make sure that he doesn't turn his head into me, otherwise I'm going to smash the side of his neck. I'm going to smash his muscles. It's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to smash his trachea. So if I'm here, I'm going to open my elbow to turn his head straight. Now if I put weight down with this elbow, extending my leg here, kind of sprawling on top of his neck, I have the choke, right? I can even sprawl my other leg too. Putting a lot of weight. I'm not going to demonstrate because it's brutal, right? But shoulder pressure here, which gives me the angle for this arm, right? If I'm completely flat, it's hard to grab his neck. So as I walk around, I was here, right? Over, under. I trap his arm, palm up, walk around to north to side control, trapping his arm. His arm is trapped in between our ribs. Now he has only one arm to defend. Keep your head low to block his free arm as you work on the choke. Right? Control his shoulder, pressure down, open my elbow so he doesn't turn his face into me. And I drop my body weight. Not only my arm strength, but body weight behind his arm. Lean into the arm for the choke. Okay? Now, sometimes when I'm applying the choke here, since if I do a good job, the guy cannot turn his face into me because I'm opening my arm, my elbow. So he might try to turn away. If he turns away, because I'm still on my shoulder, I can pass my leg over his head. Right? So he's trying to run away, turning to his side, pass my leg over. Right? Because I'm dipping this shoulder down, it's easier. I'm putting weight on my shoulder, it's easier to pass my leg over. As I pass my leg over, I lift the other one, squatting. And I'm gonna, the hand that's choking the guy, I slide to the wrist, pinch my knees together. And I have the arm bar here. You already know, if he tries to hitchhike escape, I turn his hand to the other side and crank it this way. Or if he really goes, I go to the omoplata. Now for the finish, I can control the shoulder here, open my elbow, and also lift his shoulder with my hand, right? Because he might turn his head into me and prevent the choke, but also if he turns to his side, he also prevents the choke, right? So I don't want him turning to his side, but using my shoulder pressure and lifting this shoulder here. If I lift this shoulder, he cannot turn to his side, and I'm going to apply the choke here, okay? Also, another variation here is maybe he's already turning his head this way, and I cannot find his chin to open his head and turn the other side. So I'm going to cross face the guy here. I cross face, turning his head that way, and I'm going to come with my hand from the back door here. I circle. My wrist is still turning his head that way as I catch the neck. Alright, so if his head is already turning this way and cannot find his chin, I cross face, turn his head that way, still shoulder pressure, and now look, my hand comes, I don't let him turn into me, try to turn your head into me. My wrist turns his head that way as I circle, and I have my choke here again. Boom. Again, if he decides to turn away, my shoulder pressure allows me to throw my leg and sit down. Pinch my knee so I don't lose his arm, and slide this hand from the choke through the wrist. And I have my arm bar here. Now let's take a look at some options from the double under control, okay? So maybe I'm throwing my arm around, I lift my head too much as I go to knock him down. He's already shooting his arm under, and we land on this double under position. So look what I'm gonna do. It depends on his arm positioning here. If his arms are around my back but he's not controlling hand to hand, I can always go back to the over-under if I want to. Right? I can always free my arm and start working here my paper cutter or the Kimura on the other arm. That's always an option. I cannot do that if the guy is hugging hand to hand together. Right? I cannot free my arms now. There is no space. So what I'm going to do first, make sure that I don't get rolled here, because if he's explosive and big guy, he can maybe roll me here. So I'm sprawling on his face, turning his face to his left side. If his head's turning to that side, I know that he can only turn to that way. So I'd be happy on this side here a little more. Okay? Just to hold myself, I open my arms here, just to prevent the roll. But how I'm going to break his grips now and start attacking? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to choose one side here and bring my knee next to his shoulder, blocking his shoulder. As I do that, I shoot my arm to the other side, switching my hips in order to break his grip. I'm pretty much going to Kazagatame position now. Catching his arm here below his elbow and hugging his face in order to break his grip, right? Sometimes, just by throwing my arm and switching my hips, he breaks his grip. If it doesn't break, I can always use my arm here, pushing down and cross-facing the guy here. And look where we are. We are in the windshield choke position. Connect my hands together, connect my bicep on his face, and start driving his tricep against his head. Sometimes, as I switch my hips, I miss his elbow. Okay, I break his grip, but I cannot capture his elbow. And we are on this position here, right? This underhook of him here is no good because he can start turning that way and escaping, okay? So, I can always transition to the paper cutter. I know this underhook is causing me trouble here. I'm gonna underhook his underhook. And then, we are in the paper cutter position. See that the purpose of moving my knee next to his shoulder is to actually pivot on that knee and shoot my hips as close to his hips as possible, extending his arms and helping to break his grip. Alright guys, now let's take a look at the double over position. Okay, we have more options with the gi, but let's see also what we can do with no gi. I'm going around, and now as I shoot my arm trying to block his hip, he shoots his right arm through, and we are in this double over position. Okay, it's not the best position because if he just lifts his arm up and starts shrimping down, it's scooping out already. I can save myself here by controlling his belt, right? So if he tries to shrink down, it's not gonna work. Right, I'm attached to the guy here. No gi, I don't have this luxury here, so I either immediately try to transition to over-under, or in case if he tries to extend his arms and shrink down, I'm gonna tripod up here. As he goes down, I'm able to follow the guy here, right? At least to maintain the position until I throw my arm over the top and we are on the over-under. But let's work here with the gi. First, establishing the position, controlling his belt. I sprawl on his face, I'm holding the guy down here. Okay? And now slowly, I'm gonna take my time here and start opening his gi. Slowly, without losing control. Anytime he tries to escape, I control the gi. I'm gonna start opening the lapel here. Okay? I'm gonna start opening both sides. I get my grip here really close to his armpit. Okay? Take my time, of course. If the gi is opening up, it helps me. Otherwise, I'm gonna be here very careful with my control and opening the lapel. Once I get my gi grips here really tight against his armpit, I'm ready to pop up to my feet and take his back. So look what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just squat my feet closer to his shoulders. I can use my hands on the mat here and pop to my feet. I don't wanna pull the guy up, otherwise I miss his arms and I miss the gi here. What I wanna do is pop to my feet and sit down instead. I sit down and pull the guy on top of me here. So now I can take his back. There are three types of north and south: over-under, double over, and double under controls. Most of the time I'm gonna get into the north and south position by transitioning from other types of side control. From the over-under position, I can trap my opponent's forearm and work a Kimura lock, and also combine it with an armbar. If my opponent blocks his forearm, I can always go back to side control, trapping his knee arm, and work my paper cutter choke. If he decides to defend his neck turning away, he's gonna leave his arm behind and I'm gonna catch it with an armbar. If he hugs my back in the double under position, I'm gonna switch my hips, breaking his grip, and catch him with the windshield choke. If I miss his arm during the grip break, I can always go back to the paper cutter choke. Taking the back with the double lapel grip is the best option for the double over control.